Welcome back to the Sampan Viking on China channel. Today we're going to be talking briefly about the situation in Afghanistan with a particular focus on what appears to be some fairly misleading information being put out by mainstream media. So to start off, I think it's best to really take a look at what is actually happening in Afghanistan. Well, we all know that the Americans have done a substantial withdrawal of their forces announced by surprise, literally about a month ago, and that now the rundown on US forces is quite minimal compared to what it has been. There's still a large presence around the Green Zone, around the Kabul airport, things of that nature, but in terms of the forward bases and a lot of their ability to provide tactical air support seems to have been redeployed away. So what we have now is a situation where the Taliban are taking, and other groups are taking advantage of this void in the power structure in order to expand into it. This is being portrayed in the media as a major offensive, and they may well be correct in that. But we all know from many years now of watching Afghanistan and, of course, watching the war in Syria, just how misleading certain facts and details can actually be. I mean, the BBC are producing a couple of maps in many of their articles which show the government districts which are under either government control, Taliban control, or what they call it, contested. And for balance, they produced one from about 2017, which showed something similar, although it only really showed Taliban and government control. And these areas were completely different. So it shows that there is a lot of fluidity in the situation on the ground, and there are very few hard and fast bastions of control either way. We also know that these nicely cut out and coloured areas makes the thing look a lot more solid and cohesive than it really is. We certainly know this from studying the Syrian war over the last 10 years. We know that areas that are nominally under control of one side or the other can still come under surprise attack. There can be groups operating. It's never cohesive. The lines never follow the political boundaries which are drawn on the map, the local government boundaries. There's an awful lot of overspill in all ways. And contested means it's just a good old scrap going there. And that can vary from bits of it which are strongholds for one side, strongholds for the other side, and a lot where actually there's not much going on at all. It's largely empty space, and it's controlled by whoever happens to be moving across it at that particular time. But nobody really lingers there to establish much in the way of control because it's either mountains or desert, and it's pretty pointless. It doesn't control anything. We know from Syria that the Afghan government forces will be looking in terms of towns, cities, roads, and wells as their main gathering points and their main fortifying areas, and key things such as this are going to be targets by the Taliban. A lot was made, I think, of them taking control of areas which were sparsely populated and pretty much empty. It simply means that the government forces had withdrawn to solidify stronger areas, and so these were left empty by default because there's not a huge amount there. That's not to say the Taliban haven't been making real gains. We know they've taken control of major border crossings to a number of neighbouring countries, and we know that government troops also withdrew across the border. Why they withdrew across the border and whether that's permanent is still moot. Maybe they were separated, maybe had nowhere else to go, maybe they simply didn't want to have any other part of it because there's a lot of local tribalism and factionalism inside Afghanistan. And in fact, I think it's fair to mention that on pretty much all sides, I think you'd be stretched to think of it as cohesive on any particular side. The Taliban certainly are a group of factions. They may have larger factions that speak certainly for those larger factions and maybe can corral enough of the other factions in to make it appear cohesive, but a lot on the ground. I think you've got a lot of local commanders who affiliate, and as we've seen also in Syria, those affiliations can be pretty much flags of convenience, and they can change over very, very quickly. So there we have it. A few definite strongholds on either side. A lot of the area where what has gone from a low-level insurgency fighting over much of the last 20 years has now flared up to a more high-level insurgency over vast areas of the country, and may very well, as people are saying, be heading to the point of actual civil war. Although it is questionable at what is the point of delineation between a high-level insurgency and an out-and-out civil war. It does seem a little bit of a journalistic nicety when the bombs, the bullets, and the rocket propelled grenades start flying. Um, I don't think you're going to be worrying too much about the semantics. As far as you're concerned, the fighting's happening, the fighting's here, and it's affecting you. And I think most people would say, oh, civil war. So why do we have to be careful about what we're hearing from the media on this? Well, that's a very, very good question. The word being put about at the moment, the last few days, is to a lot of warnings saying that the effects of a Taliban taking control of the country could uptick the terrorism levels throughout the world. Maybe not immediately, but later. And again, comments being made today, including those from General Petraeus, is trying to intimate that Al Qaeda and other groups are fighting with the Taliban against the government. Now, I sort of I have to question this because that does not sound right at all. What we can say is that in the areas not controlled definitely by the Taliban, where it is listed as contested, there are other groups as well as the Taliban also fighting. Now, other jihadi groups may very well be in Afghanistan, and they may very well be fighting government forces, but because they are both the government's enemy doesn't necessarily make them friends. They could very well be competitors, and this certainly is the story that we've been hearing from the Taliban in their diplomatic rounds when they've been visiting Moscow and Tianjin over the last couple of weeks. Um, can we trust the Taliban? Well, that's a very moot question again. I certainly wouldn't say, yes, of course you can. I think you have to be cautious. If they are simply looking to get space to achieve their objectives without disruption from further outside powers, that's a perfectly credible interpretation. But I think if you have fairly senior diplomats, both on the Russian and the Chinese side, and these people are not fools. These are professional career diplomats who are well briefed, have plenty of good intelligence on the area, on the group, certainly as good as it gets, who are saying that they believe that the Taliban now have had enough of 30 years of endless conflict. They want to settle down. They understand that they need to be a lot more inclusive than they were before, um, and be a government of national reconciliation as much as anything. Then I suppose we can't afford to dismiss that out of hand. Obviously, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, but they have eschewed working and being in cahoots with the Al Qaeda franchise. Certainly, the Uyghur offshoot of Al Qaeda, which is the ETIM, I can imagine how it's a strange kind of doublethink where the West will try to lump these all together in one. Mainly, I suppose, so that if Al Qaeda does commit another atrocity anywhere in the world, they can try to link it back to the Taliban. And I suppose by extension, if Russia and China are saying, well, we support the Taliban in their efforts, then they can try to link them into it as well. That is, I think, a fairly obvious curveball you can see. So we shall wait and see what they are actually going to try to make out of this. At the moment, it obviously is a very, very untidy picture. But if jihadis from formerly in Syria, formerly in Libya, are now returning to Afghanistan, I would be very, very surprised if they are working hand in glove with the Taliban. We know that Islamic State, for instance, is definitely a rival to the Taliban, and I wouldn't be surprised after 20 years has passed that what now it passes as Al Qaeda would be another group looking to, of international jihadis, that would be looking to forge out a piece of Afghanistan for themselves and maybe try to taint all others in the country by association. I think generally you can say that the Afghan government lacks much in the way of credibility. They are seen as a Western force creation. The fact that they are struggling so hard, so fast after US withdrawal to hold territory and by that to hold public support in a country where people are quite used to picking up the AK-47 and manning the barricades. It seems far more people that seem happy to do it for the Taliban than they are for the government forces. Whether that is true or not, and just how it looks, again, that is something that time will tell. Well, there we are. Simply to say is that we are moving into a different phase of the conflict in Afghanistan. There are other actors moving in from the outside who probably are not affiliated with either side and have their own agendas. And take what you hear from mainstream media here in the West with a strong pinch of salt, a health warning if you wish. Well, thank you very much for listening. I hope it shone a little bit of light into a very murky corner indeed. If you enjoyed this video, please like, please subscribe, please ring the bell. If you would like to show it to other people, please share. And I would love to have a comment from you, and I'll be only too happy to reply. Until next time, thank you very much. See you again before too long.